Alexander Max Koester was born February 10th, 1864 in Bergneustadt, Germany. He started out going to school to be a pharmacist in Colmar at his parents' wishes. 3 years later, he enrolled in the Karlsruhe Academy to study art under Klaus Meyer and Karl Hoff, both specializing in domestic genre painting. He graduated there in 1887. In 1889, he made a series of trips through the Netherlands, through rocky terrains in the Alpine Valley, sketching picturesque landscapes and images of rural life. Having visited the resort town of Clausen in 1891, he chose to settle there. This peaceful, isolated atmosphere was conducive to refining his artistic style. It was here that he started painting ducks, producing a range of variations based on the Anatidae duck species. The duck series debuted in Berlin in 1899 to great acclaim, with the cost of each work of art subject to the number of ducks depicted. His style, which resembled a free form of Impressionism, drew praise from critics and art patrons, leading to a job offer from the Darmstadt Academy at the end of the year. Alexander Koester declined the job, preferring instead to build a career as a freelance artist. Early in the 1900s, he rented a studio in Munich to be closer to the vistas of Upper Bavaria, where he spent most summer months. In 1908, he began to travel into the region around Lake Constance, painting and sketching the changing colors of the water in various weather conditions. This stopped in 1915 when the area was declared a war zone. Koester gained the title Enten, or Duck Koester, as he was one of the few artists who so popularly and for such a long period painted ducks in their natural habitat. Koester passed away in December of 1932 in Munich. Today, pictures of his ducks embedded in landscapes still account for his reputation as Enten Koester. Okay, I have primed my Stillman Burn sketchbook with Zinsser Bullseye Primer that you get at Home Depot or Walmart. I usually will tint the Zinsser with some acrylic paint just to give myself a tone, but I decided I wanted to work on white surface for this painting. And I just put one coat. I put a little bit of water with it because it's really thick. I put a coat on this way and then I rubbed it back that way, so it's pretty smooth. It's not real thick. The paper is made for all media, so it really didn't have to have that, but I thought it would help make it not so absorbent. Now, the next thing I need to decide, and doing this study from Alexander Max Koester, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, is how much of the painting do I want to do as a study. I think it'll be quicker to just do one or three of the birds. There are 7. And remember, for a good composition, you always want an odd number. So the option would be to do 1 or 3 of the birds, or maybe 5 if you wanted to. There's 2 brown ducks and 4 white ducks, so there's a variety that way. And usually the decision is made for me based on what part really drew me to the painting. And I love the colors in the white ducks, the reflections and from the water, and the softness of their feathers. So I guess my favorite one is probably this one on the bottom. And that these 3 here would give me a nice study to includes a brown one and the other two. The ones in the back would also be a nice study. This one is hidden behind the other two, and I think it would be kind of awkward to do 4 ducks. So you'll have to make a decision based on what part of this really jumps out at you. You could even just do 1 duck if you wanted to. Also, the size of canvas is 9 by 12, which is pretty small. So in real life, this is 24 inches by 32 inches. So it's a large canvas. So that kind of helps me make my decision. If I have to fit 7 ducks on here, I've got my bamboo skewer. The largest duck, I could fit 1, 2 and a half at an angle. So 1, 2, well, they'd have to be a little smaller. 1, 2 and a half. It'd have to be about that big. If I just try to get the 3, this area here, which is what I may do. I like the water here in the foreground. So I just have to work that all out. How many ducks would fit on there? And again, I'm using this big obvious one as my reference. So if I measure from the tip of the tail to the beak, and then from the tip of the tail to the back of this one's tail is about 1 3/4. So if I put that duck here, a little lower on the canvas, 1 3/4. The back of that one's duck tail would be right here. So that would probably work. I think that's what I'll do. I'll try the 3 ducks in the foreground. It also gives me, this one is foreshortened. Their beaks are down, so these will be a little easier to draw, but that beak is kind of coming straight at us, so that'll be a good opportunity for study. And that head is really dark, so that gives us a good combination of water, white ducks, and the dark duck to study. Okay, so you know, if you've studied with me at all, that I take quite a bit of time on the front end to do a little bit of planning. And you know, just thinking about these ducks, is the composition great on them? I don't know. I like the colors of the ducks. I can almost talk myself out of it if I'm not careful. But I think I'm going to push on through and just think a little bit about the design. If I just do the 3 ducks, I have this design. This duck is almost swimming out of the picture. There's a V, kind of a V shape. Not much space in between them. And I think that's what makes an interesting composition, is the space between items, whatever you're working on. So you've got some S stuff going on here, and then maybe down behind there. So what if I decided to make a little change myself and move the ducks apart just a bit? And if I'm just going to do these 3, if I create a little space in between them and bump this tail down, because actually the tail and the beak are almost at a tangent. You know, I think I've learned the hard way that if I don't do preliminary planning, if I don't think it through and look at the possible problems, because I'm going to change his composition. The light is really interesting. You kind of read this painting from the top down this way. So if I cut that out, am I going to make the whole background dark and just have these ducks in sort of dappled light? I don't know. So it's a good question. There's also an opening here. So I think I'll do a few little sketches to decide before I make a final decision. And I would encourage you to always do maybe 3 sketches whenever you start a new project of 3 possibilities. Okay, without doing any measuring or anything, I've got some printer paper, 8.5 by 11, so it's close to the same size and proportionately about the same as my 9 by 12. So I'm just going to do a quick little gesture drawing with simple shapes. to see how this works to start with. All right, no real detail, but just a little bit of a gesture drawing. Again, no real detail. So there's the duck without letting him fall out the bottom of my canvas. And I really, if I make him that big, I don't have room to move this duck back. So if I do it exactly like I see it here, there's a circle and a triangle, and then his head is a circle. All right, and then this one, again, it goes up into this one a little. There's a circle for his chest. There's another circle back here for his body. And then a triangle back there. His head is up here even with this one. And then his beak is like that. Do I like that? All right, so that's one possibility. Number two, make the duck smaller so that I can separate them a little bit, but I want a little bit of that blue water in the foreground. So I don't want to get too small. The head is like this. All right, and then if I separate this duck a little so that it's not touching that one, I already like this one better. Again, no real detail here. Don't worry, don't get hung up on the details. Just do a quick gesture. And it may tell me that I want to move them over a bit. I don't want this duck's beak to be right on the edge of the canvas. I'd rather have the tail run off as if they're coming in this way and they've got a little space in front of them. So that's important. Beak, funny beak. I'm not going to worry about trying to draw that. And then the body back here. Neck. That feels a little better to me, moving them over so that there's some space in between here. I could do some shadows here. Could do some ripples in front of this duck. And you could definitely put this pretty blue color in here. So that one wins. And let me make myself do a third one because I think that's important. How about if I try these three? They're all white. I don't really have any variety there, but I don't want to change it up. I don't want to try to do this one in that one's place because I can't see the beak. I can't see the front of it, and it'll be a struggle. So, let's see. Let me just try. They're all kind of facing the same. And the water's not that interesting. There is some pretty blue on the left of that duck. So maybe, let me lower the ducks. There we go. All right. So let's do one duck here. Here's the tail. And here's the circle of the head. The whole circle of the head. And the neck. All right, and then here's one up here. Another circle underneath. And here's this oval of that one. Whoops, too close. So I gotta look at how much space there is. Have to be smaller. I'll have to be smaller than I have them. See, I'm getting into trying to draw them too quick. All right, this one's head is about this far. Circle. I have to make them even smaller. So that tells me right off the bat, I'm gonna run them off the page. It's not a bad composition. I could have the opening here with the light coming in. So I would probably either choose these three or those three. I'll make them a little smaller and see what happens here. And to decide how much of the water I want to show and how much of the background. So I'm going to say we'll crop it here, which means that much water. The duck needs to go lower, smaller. Here's the head, the beak, little flip up of the tail. Again, no real drawing here. Here's the other head, the oval of the body. It is close to the same level as that one. Again, you'll get frustrated if you try to do a beautiful drawing here. That's not the purpose of this. This is for layout purposes only. So don't get hung up on that. All right, and then right out of his head comes this duck in the back. Can't really see the back of his tail, but we could probably make that up. You can see the negative space right here. All right, and then here is the water line with greenery. So you do see some reflections of this duck. You do see some nice colors in here. You could, if you wanted to, put that duck running off the page. I think it would still work. So decisions. Which do I do? It's a good practice for me to make myself do these silly sketches. And then to put them all up here and look at them. And I think I like this one. Even though I like this little bit of light, I don't love the way the greenery is in the background. That's not anything that drew me to the painting. I don't think it's painted that well. The whites and the grays in there don't look realistic to me. I think the ducks are the prettiest part. So I think I'll go back to my original decision, which was the ducks coming in from the top. All right, not to say that I'm not going to run into some problems along the way, but I do think I will, of the three, I'll go back to this one where I pulled the ducks apart just a little bit. I'm going to put some light in between them because I see a little dappled light in here. And I like this blue area of water in the foreground. So I may move them over just a tad, like maybe to there, so that the end of the tail doesn't land as a tangent right on the edge of the canvas. So if you don't learn anything at all from this, I hope you learn to stop and do a few rough drafts, even if you think you know exactly what you need to do, or even if you don't have the patience to do it. I'm going to keep this in my hand. I laid it aside, but I'm going to keep it in my hand to remind me. I'm going to make sure that the duck doesn't go any farther than about here with his beak. And I'd like the tail feathers of this dark one to not go any farther than there. And if I think about the shape, including this blue water down here, it's kind of a shape like this. This will fill the whole canvas up. That's a good idea sometimes, to make yourself a little cocoon to kind of keep yourself in this parameter. Now remember, I measured this duck, and from his beak to his tail feathers, he is, from tail feathers to the tail of the dark duck is 3/4. So now I just need to divide this canvas, this segment from tail feathers to beak, into one, and well, I'm moving it apart, so a little less than, I'll say 2, because I want to move it apart. So here's the first duck, and there's the second duck. So I want to try to make this first duck end about right there. That will leave me room. Feathers start, and he's about 2 3/4 of his width. So let me just guess on a width here. 1, 2, that's about right. Maybe a little smaller. 1, let me use this end. 1, 2 3/4. So his height, where his body is only going to be about this wide through the middle section. So see, that gives me a little bit of an idea of how big that duck needs to be. Measuring height to width, how does that compare? So those are some standards I can continue to use as I move around in this drawing. Spend the time you need to lay these things out. You can jump in here and just draw them on if you want to, and then you can check it. If that works better for you, if this drives you nuts, I totally get it. I totally understand. There is a nice oval for the body right here that really works well. It extends more than just the oval, but I'll start with this oval. Again, I know that is the beak, so the body's going to be over here. So I'll start with my little oval right here. Very lightly, that is key. That is the biggest part of this duck, is that oval. I'm thinking about measuring, I'm thinking about angles here. That angle is like this. So you don't want them sticking up too much. Then it goes this way, then it goes up. Same here. The head, right where the chest goes, right about through the circle of the head. Here's the beak. And the beak is down lower than the body of the duck. So even though I've established my perimeter over here, I'm going to have to lower it. Because yeah, he's off the page. So I do have a lot of dark over here on this side. So maybe I'll redraw it and move everything over just a little bit. Even when you measure, you can make these kinds of mistakes. So get it right to start with. If you have to draw it 2 or 3 times, that's fine. Okay, let's see how easy it is to erase. I used a tissue, and now I've switched to my little tri-tip eraser, which is my good workhorse of an eraser. It's still not erasing too well. I think the Zinsser was a little bit damp, but that's okay. Again, we're going to paint over all this. All right, so I'm going to start again over here. And I want there to be enough room to fit 2 ducks in here. Yeah, that's better without it going off the page. There's a nice rhythm right here to this duck. It goes over, and then it goes under, and then it goes over again, and then it flips up. So I know I've exaggerated that a little bit, but that's a nice rhythm that you might want to try to retain. And he flattens out kind of in stages down here. The neck comes up. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this drawing because I'm going to wipe the ducks out. I just want to make sure I have them placed right. All right, and then we said that from head to beak is the same as a little shorter than head to beak over here. I want to separate them so I can see where my other one was. I don't want to go any higher than that. Do your simple shapes. If I put the head right here in the center, then I can check myself. It's a little, should be a little smaller than this, and so it's not. So that means I'm off somewhere. I've gotten it too big. Let's see. Let's make it a little smaller, like this. Here to here, there to there. Now it's right. Tail feathers, beak, then this duck comes close to the edge of the beak on that one and is from the beak to the back of the head. He's a little bit smaller. Let me go back to this one. And remember, this one was how many of these? 2 3/4? 1, 2 3/4. 1, 2 3/4. So that's about right. So this duck needs to be a little shorter right there. You can also hold plumb lines up to see how that head intersects the body. There's a little bit left over, so I don't want to get too far. This body comes over from this head about here, so maybe I can make that a little bit bigger this way. Let me check it again. Here to here. Here to here should be smaller, so I'm already starting to get too big. This head touches this duck. And then the tail feathers. All right, that feels better. There we go. So really and truly, do not stress yourself out, but get the ducks in the right place. Get them about the same size so that they're relative. So now, let's check a few more things. Let's check the total height of this duck and see what it's the same as. Is it the same? Is it the same as anything? And not really. It is that much bigger. So we could come over here and check. So that's about right. It's this much bigger than the duck's head. See? Let's check and see how this one compares. So from his head to his tail feathers is about the same as this one. So head to tail feathers. So that's about the same. How does it overlap? Well, this head really overlaps this duck more than I have it. So you see the beak coming out this way. That beak's funny. That's going to be the foreshortened beak. The body really goes behind, in front of that duck a little more than I have it. Look how much space I have here. The head is more this way on this duck. There's more space showing here. How does this beak compare on the duck? Well, it's over to this way on the body a bit more than it is the other way. Facing down to 5 o'clock, 5:30, something like that. Here's the neck. How much space here? That looks better. This beak comes along about the same as that beak. So maybe I'll make this one a little fatter. And this again is my, I will even draw a little area where I want this pretty blue color to be, because I think I want to make sure I get that in. And then this duck has some ripples that are nice. There's some big shadow shapes in the water up here as well. Now, how do we handle this space up here? That's a good question. I think I'll decide that right now. I think I'm going to vignette this like this. I'm not going to finish the paint all the way out. So I'm going to go ahead and draw myself a little vignette of how that's going to look. And the ducks are obviously the lightest thing on the page, but I think it would be nice to have, since we're flowing this way, to have this area light, maybe coming in this way with some light brown color and warmth. And then this would all be dark over here. It will also be dark here to make this duck really stand out, because that's the way it is. There's some dark, there's some light coming around, dappled light in here. So I may leave that a little bit lighter. Some dark shadows under the ducks. Some dark shadows here. Again, just making a plan. It's going to help me when I start laying the color in. It's going to be dark under here. Maybe some middle tone over here, but this will be dark. I think some grasses here. And this blue. Put a bee there to remind myself. Not that I'll have to. Okay. I cleaned off my palette, which made me so happy. I had left all the paint on there from the last painting we did. The study of the, I guess it was the grapes and the apples. I don't know which one it was. Maybe it was the, yeah, I think it was the study of the grapes. So I had some beautiful colors, and I thought I was going to get back to it. And of course I never did. So I use a razor like this. You can tell it's well worn. And I scrape, 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 and then I had my clove oil spilled. So I just used a little of that clove oil to wipe this down. Also, your mineral spirits want a little rag. Just be sure to throw your rag in the trash. This is some leftover mud from the painting that's really nice and buttery. It was mostly cad red with some blues and greens in it, and I looked at the painting up here and I see that color a lot. So it's just a brown, a kind of a blah brown. But remember, the old masters used very dull colors to make their subjects sparkle. So this, you'll see how that kind of moves everything around and gives it a really nice clean pile. And the reason I like these small palette knives is you can use them to make smaller piles. Well, I'm kind of doing that, but just to make a nice clean palette to start with. Plenty of paper towels. You can also use an old catalog. I got one of those from Uline or something in the mail this week, so I have that handy so I don't use quite so many paper towels. I squeezed out ultramarine blue. Make sure you can see it here. Ultramarine blue, cad red light. I had some leftover magenta, and I had some leftover chromium green and Prussian blue, so I just left those out. And some cad yellow light. Lay in kind of a background tone for this today. and then I want to wipe the ducks out. So that's the goal of what I'm mixing up. And I want a brownish color, which you know that if you mix the complements red and green, you'll get a brown. If you mix orange and blue, you'll get a kind of a brown, an orangey brown sometimes. So I'm just going to start with the red and mix it with the blue, and you know that's going to give us a purple. So if I make it, go ahead and add some yellow to make that green, and we mix red and green, we're going to get a really dark brown. So let's see what happens when we do that. That helps you a little bit with the complements, and I like for you to stay aware of the complements. If it starts to go too purple, just add more yellow in with it. Because again, we wanted to do a green, more of a green color. So that's close to what I already have mixed up. And you can darken it with more blue and make it even darker. And again, remember, if you use red and blue only, it's gonna keep going purple. So the yellow, you have to use the yellow to get it to be a truer brown. Let's see what happens when we just use that much. Yeah, so that's getting browner. Now, is it a dark enough brown? I added ultramarine blue to get that really dark. The more red you put in there, it's gonna start going more towards the purple side. But you see all that in this painting. You see reddish colors, you see really dark, it goes bluish in some places. It also, there's some almost raw sienna areas. So you could come over here and mix up a little bit of your yellow and blue and red to make because purple and yellow makes that raw sienna color. Starts to go green, you just need to put a little bit more red in it. And that'll give you more of a raw sienna color. This will be really good for you to practice mixing colors. These should all be pretty dreary, dull colors. Nothing. The ducks, again, are the star of this painting. So you don't want anything to get really too beautiful and bright. It's going to be pretty dull. I don't see this color much. So I got a big pile of that mixed up, and I don't really see it. So let me see what we can do to it to help. Let's put more yellow with it. There we go. That's getting more of a raw sienna color right there. That looks better. But I do see some orange tones in there, sort of like burnt sienna. So kind of looking through, I see all these colors mixed in. I don't have any white out because I really don't want to think about highlights right now. We just want to wipe in a tone for the background. You could lighten a few of these, but I would lighten them with the yellow. Stay away from the adding any white to it at this point. Let's put a little bit of yellow all the way around and see what happens. That makes kind of an interesting green. Do I see that anywhere? No. So hold your palette knife up while you're mixing, and look at your painting, your subject, what you're looking at, and let that be your guide. So yeah, I see this color green in a few places. Okay, over here to this orangish color, I've just added more yellow, which is, again, is giving you that raw sienna color. And you see that a lot in there. Over here to the burnt sienna color, the lighter burnt sienna color. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit more ultramarine blue to this dark pile, just to get it really dark. See what happens when you add red to it? It goes really purple and it lightens it. So I don't like that one. I'm going to get rid of that. I'd rather stay on this really nice deep dark right here, and this brown color. Keep it simple. If you get too many colors going on here, it's going to get busy, and it's going to distract from the main subject, which is the ducks. I am using 2 filberts, and they're ivory. One of them's an ivory, one of them's a Robert Simmons bristle filbert. They're not real stiff, but on this first layer you want a pretty aggressive brush so you can lay the paint in. You can be kind of rough with the canvas and lay it in fast. So I'm going to start with the darkest dark and go ahead and lay in these areas of dark. And you can go ahead, I did dip my brushes in mineral spirits just to get rid of the brush cleaner that was on them. If this feels really stiff to you, you can add a little medium to it to help the paint move around. See how stiff it is going on this paper. So I probably do need to open up a little medium. Or you can just use some mineral spirits. Don't use a lot of mineral spirits, but just to thin your paint up a little bit so that it goes on really thin. This sketchbook paper is very absorbent. And I probably should have taken a little bit more time and put several layers of Zinsser on it. But I have also found Zinsser to be very absorbent too. So go ahead and just lay these darks in. Big, thin. The darks always go on thin. Lay them on. We've got to get this covered so that the next layer won't be so, won't go on so stiff. Don't worry too much about having it exactly the right color. Just think about value right now. Remember, as we go back on any painting, you adjust the temperature, and you can do that later. Just get this first layer on. You'll feel so much better next time when you sit down to work on it. And don't overthink it. Don't worry too much about your brush strokes. Just get it on there. It is warmer up here, and it seems to get a little cooler as it gets closer to the ducks. So you can think about that and kind of try to lay it on as close to what you see. If it starts to feel redder or more orange, which it does down here by this one's head, and try not to color in too much. Now, if you have a really nice surface right now that you're painting on, if you're using a good canvas, I would say go over the whole thing and then get a cloth and wipe it off. But it's not gonna wipe off easy. So, but I am gonna go back around like this and wipe off these areas around the ducks. So working an overlapping with an overlapping method, and see it lifts with the little mineral spirits. Don't try to do the coloring book thing. Don't try to make yourself color everything in. This is not a real photorealistic type of a painting, but it's not real loose either. So bear in mind the type of painting that it is. And then again, you just see me massing it in. Don't worry too much about it. We're gonna go over this background a couple of times. And it will be fun to use a cloth and use your fingers to wipe out around these ducks. I think that's gonna help with their softness as well. Remember, if you are used to using a grid or you're used to tracing, I understand, but you need to try to help yourself get out of that because you're going to be drawing in every stage of the game. You can't get away from drawing. So every time I lay a mark on here, even with this loose background, I'm looking at what I'm doing. So don't let yourself start painting with just no awareness of what you're doing. Look at what you're doing. Every time your brush hits the canvas, look at what you're doing. I did not mix any of that blue color up, but I can just grab a little bit of ultramarine and go ahead and make myself a little color note where that blue water goes, because I don't want that canvas to get too dark right there. It's harder to get any luminosity on a dark area if it's dried. So go ahead and put a little color note in there for where that blue water goes. If you got any more left on your brush, go ahead and just knock it off where you think there's blue. This is not fun putting this first layer on. It's really stiff. It's not going on smooth at all. But the goal is to just get something in the way of values on here. Now I'm going to move to, I have two brushes because I want to use one for the darks and one for the medium to light tones. We're not really working on real light, we're working on middle tones. So I'm going to reach in and get some of this raw sienna color. And I want to put this area where the light's going to be between the ducks and kind of decide, kind of a baby poop color. Not very good, but it's all right. We'll fix it. Is there anywhere else I see that? But we want a pathway in. You want a pathway in so that you know without a doubt the way to read this painting, and you read it from the top left. And there's some light. Remember, there's light in between the ducks. That was what we were after in separating them. So let's go ahead and put a little bit of that in between. You can use some more mineral spirits here if you want to make sure the paint goes on thin, because I have it on really heavy. A little bit of that down here, but it's more orange in front of this brown duck. There's some dark shadow under this white duck in the center. So you can, you know, as much as you can, go ahead and put those areas of shadow and light in. It's very dark up here. Even though we've got light coming in here, there's some dark around this tail feathers of this back duck. And right in here is dark. And it's a little more greenish down in this corner. I should have a clip on my sketchbook right now. You don't want a moving target, so make sure you stabilize your easel and your whatever you're painting on so it's not moving around. I'm making myself sit back because the camera's in front of me, but it's a good practice to get away from your painting. This is really not good at this stage, but I wanted you to see the stage of just blocking it in. All right, so I've got the background just about completely covered. Let's have this path of light. We're changing it a little bit, but this path will come down. It'll bounce around on this duck, be a little bit through here, and the rest of this duck just kind of gets lost in the dark duck gets lost in the shadow up here. When you're doing a still life painting or any kind of painting, you want to think about the spaces in between your subjects. Those are just as important in the composition as the objects themselves. So think about the design that the patterns of light make and the design that the spaces in between the ducks are making. Is it interesting? All right, so that looks like a big muddy mess. Now, if you have a cotton cloth, that would work better than a paper towel. But I've got these wipes that are kind of like, they're not really cloth, but they're like a cotton cloth, like a t-shirt. And I would go around the edge here, thinking about the shapes of these ducks. Like, I just took a little too much off there. The duck has this dip down right here. So don't lose the drawing at all completely in here. That's where, again, where you have to know how to draw. You cannot skip this part. There's a shadow behind this duck right there. So, but the whole point here is to make some nice soft edges that you can paint back into. And to keep the area where these ducks are going to go light, so it doesn't get, so you don't have any cut out pasted on edges. And I keep moving my finger on this rag so that I have a clean area. You could draw the shapes of these ducks if you want to, almost like if you were using an eraser. We've been doing the drawing series, and we've been using the erasers a lot for drawing, to lighten areas and carve areas out. But it feels a lot better when you get in here with this rag and you start wiping some things out. This is all we're going to do today on this first go around. We're not going to lay the duck colors in. We're just going to get some background on there, and you see it's not dark enough. We're going to be going a lot darker with it. I started laying a little bit in on this duck, and that's okay. This duck just really disappears into the shadows. Now, what would happen if I started wiping back here? Well, I'm going to lose the darks, but I think I will wipe just a little, just to get rid of some of the choppiness of it, to kind of melt it together a little bit more. Remember to move your finger around on your cloth. Especially the area where I want light to come in, like here. So maybe I'll decide my pattern of light right now, all the way over to that duck. So what you have left is a stained canvas. Where else is there light? Let's see, there's light in between the two. Which the tail feathers aren't going to stand out as well. But there is shadow here, and there should be some shadow up here. So I'll probably just have a little bit of light right in here, a little dappled light. There's a little reflection down here in front of this duck. And of course the water is really pretty. And again, I keep moving my finger so that I'm not dragging all these colors into each other and making them muddy. I'm going to wipe some of the edge too. I like this vignetted look on paintings. And everybody's is going to look totally different. So don't try to make yours exactly like what I'm doing. You won't be able to. It's really, again, we're doing a study so we can try to learn a little bit about painting white ducks. I haven't painted white ducks before, so that's our goal, is to learn about ducks. Whoops, I don't like that. So if you're not careful, you'll wipe every bit of this off. But I don't care, it's all right. I'm gonna come back in here, and you could also get a soft brush, a goat hair, or I like the mongoose brushes from Rosemary. These are my favorite. And you could come in here and soften just a little bit with this. If you've gotten a lot of marks. All the surfaces that we're painting on are going to vary. Some people, the paint's going to move around real easy, and some people it's going to be really stiff. So I can't predict for you what's going to happen, but if it's stiff like mine, you just want to make sure that you don't have anything really outlined, that you just have a good base coat to paint back into next time. Okay, so I cleaned off my mud colors and I put them in smaller piles over to the edge. The colors I used on the background, because you'll want to use those again when we work on it. It'll be easy to remix those because we're using a limited palette. Cad red, cad yellow light, and ultramarine blue. But it is a good idea to always clean your palette off when you're finished. I know if you're like me, you think you're going to get back out here and paint before it dries, but we usually don't. And there's so many deterrents to painting that if you will clean up your mess at the end, when you sit back down to do it again, you don't have so many obstacles. And it's just a good practice. If you have a really messy palette, it will translate into your painting eventually.